In today's video, you'll learn something that can really help you. So like it and subscribe so you don't miss the next ones. Let's get started.
The small ball of white fur was almost dead when Thor found it. The dark-coated German Shepherd had left the cabin behind his owner, the forest ranger James, to check the damage from the storm that battered the mountainous region for 3 consecutive days. The blizzard had been the worst in decades. Trees uprooted, trails destroyed, and a heavy silence that only comes after destruction. Thor sniffed the icy air when he sensed it. A faint smell, almost imperceptible beneath the fresh snow. Something alive, something dying. He ran before James could even call him. His paws sank into the snow up to his knees as he followed the trail to a ravine partially covered by fallen branches. And it was there, trembling violently among the frozen bodies of 5 adult wolves, that he found the pup. The creature's blue eyes opened for a second, a flash of pure terror, before closing again. The pup barely had the strength to breathe. Thor didn't think. He simply picked up the small body by the scruff of its neck, with the same gentleness he used to carry James's tennis balls, and ran back to the cabin. "My God," James murmured when he saw what Thor was carrying in his mouth. "It's a wolf." But Thor didn't let go. He carried the pup straight to his own bed, beside the fireplace, and began licking it frantically. The heat from the fire, combined with the German Shepherd's rough tongue, finally made the pup breathe more strongly. A low, painful whimper escaped from the tiny throat. James stood frozen, watching. In his 20 years working in that forest, he had never seen anything like it. A domestic dog rescuing a wild wolf. He picked up the phone to call the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, but something made him hesitate. Thor had curled himself around the pup, protecting it with his own body. His amber eyes fixed on James conveyed a clear message. "This one is mine now." "It's okay, boy," James whispered, putting the phone away. "Let's give him a chance." What neither of them knew was that this decision would change everything, and that the pup's past hid a secret impossible to imagine. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Leave in the comments what you think so far and which city or country you are watching from. In the first few days, no one believed the pup would survive. He was too small, too weak. James tried to feed him warmed milk using an improvised bottle, but the pup spat everything out. His blue eyes remained closed most of the time, and his body trembled even near the fire. It was Thor who found the solution. On the 3rd night, when James finally fell asleep exhausted in the armchair, the German Shepherd did something that would leave any veterinarian perplexed. He ate his own kibble, chewed it carefully, and then regurgitated small, predigested portions for the pup, exactly as a she-wolf would do. The pup ate. For the first time in days, he ate. James woke up to the sound and watched in silence, tears in his eyes. "You know what you're doing, don't you?" he murmured to Thor. The German Shepherd simply licked the pup's muzzle and went back to watching over him. As the weeks passed, the little wolf grew. James decided to call him Snow, because of the white fur like the storm that had almost killed him. And each day, the bond between Thor and Snow grew stronger in a way that defied all logic. Thor taught him, not the way a dog teaches games, but the way a father teaches survival. He showed Snow where to look for food along the trails, how to identify dangers by scent, when to hide and when to advance. Snow followed every movement of the German Shepherd with absolute devotion, his blue eyes shining with admiration. But something strange was happening. At night, when the full moon lit up the forest, Snow grew restless. He climbed onto the windowsill and stared fixedly at the distant mountains. A low, melancholic whine escaped his throat. It was not a dog's bark. It was the beginning of a howl. Thor always came and lay down beside him, as if wanting to say, "I am here. You are not alone." However, James began to notice something that deeply worried him. During walks through the forest, he found tracks, paw prints of adult wolves circling the property, always at a distance, always watching. They were looking for something, or someone. and James had the terrible feeling that they knew exactly where Snow was. 3 months later, Snow was twice the size. His paws were disproportionate to his body, a sign that he would be large as an adult. The white fur shone under the morning sun, and his blue eyes now carried a wild intensity that made visitors to the cabin instinctively step back. But to Thor, he was still just his pup. James watched the pair exploring the forest every afternoon. Thor had become extremely protective. Any strange sound, any movement in the trees, and the German Shepherd would immediately position himself in front of Snow, growling low. It was like watching a soldier guarding a prince. Then came the first night that changed everything. A howl echoed through the mountains. It was not a distant sound. It was close. Very close. Snow, who had been sleeping curled up with Thor near the fireplace, instantly lifted his head. His ears bristled, and for the first time, he answered. The howl that came from Snow's throat made the hair on James's arms stand on end. It was primitive, loaded with something that transcended domestication. Thor stood motionless, watching. There was no anger in his eyes. There was understanding. In the following days, the howls became frequent. James began to investigate discreetly. He spoke with other forest rangers, checked old records, searched through monitoring cameras installed in the region. That was when he discovered something that chilled him to the core. There were reports of an extremely rare pack living in those mountains. A pack of white wolves, the last of their bloodline in that region. They were legendary, almost mythical. And 6 months earlier, during the worst storm in decades, 5 adults had been found dead protecting something. A pup. James's heart sank. Snow was not just any wolf. He was the last direct descendant of that legendary pack. And the howls he heard every night were not from strangers. They were from his distant family, wolves who shared the same rare blood. They were calling Snow back. James looked at Thor and Snow sleeping together that night. The German Shepherd had his paw protectively draped over the little white wolf. An impossibly tender scene between two species that nature had designated as rivals. He knew that soon he would have to make the hardest decision of his life. And Thor knew it too. The decision was torn from their hands on a spring morning. James woke up to silence. A wrong silence. Thor always barked at dawn, but that morning there was only stillness. He jumped out of bed and ran to the living room. The door was open. Snow had run away. Thor was standing on the porch, staring fixedly at the forest. His entire body was trembling, but he did not move. James understood immediately. The German Shepherd knew where Snow had gone.
I did a lot of research to bring you this story, so the only thing I ask in return is your thumbs up and that you subscribe to support the channel. And tell me something, what do you think of the story so far? Write it down below, along with your city.
But something was holding him back from following. Go, James said, his voice breaking. Go get her, boy. Thor shot off like a black arrow, cutting through the snow that still lingered beneath the trees. He followed Snow's trail up the mountain, his heart pounding like never before. With every meter, the scent of wild wolves grew stronger. And then he saw them. In a wide clearing, surrounded by 7 adult wolves with grayish coats, stood Snow. But he was not alone. In front of him, larger than all the others, was a magnificent white she-wolf. Her eyes were identical to Snow's. Thor stopped at the edge of the clearing. The white she-wolf advanced, growling. The other wolves followed her lead, forming a protective barrier around Snow. The message was clear. He does not belong to you. Snow looked at Thor. His blue eyes were confused, divided. He took a step toward the German Shepherd, but the white she-wolf blocked his path. That was when something happened that James, watching from a distance with binoculars, would never forget. Thor lowered his head, not in submission, but in respect. He walked slowly toward Snow, ignoring the pack's threatening growls. He touched the little wolf's muzzle with his own, one last time, and then he did something extraordinary. He turned his back and began to walk down the mountain. Snow whimpered, a sharp, desperate sound. He tried to follow Thor, but the white she-wolf gently held him by the scruff of his neck. Thor stopped, looked back one last time. His amber eyes met Snow's blue ones. And then he kept walking, because sometimes loving means letting go, even when every fiber of your being is screaming at you to stay. Thor was never the same again. He spent weeks lying on the porch, staring at the mountains. He barely ate. He didn't play. James tried to comfort him. But how do you explain to a dog that he did the right thing? That true love sometimes hurts more than any physical wound. 2 months dragged on like years. Then, one summer afternoon, James heard Thor bark. It wasn't an ordinary bark. It was pure joy. He ran outside and froze. At the edge of the forest, Snow was standing there. But he was no longer a pup. He had grown magnificently, his white coat shining like fresh snow under the sun. Defined muscles marked his body, and there was a wild confidence in his movements. Behind him, the pack watched from a distance, including the white she-wolf. Snow ran. Thor ran. They met halfway in an explosion of joy. Snow licked Thor's face repeatedly, whining like he did when he was a pup. Thor checked every inch of him, making sure he was well, healthy, strong. For 20 magical minutes, they were just father and son again. But then Snow stopped. He looked Thor in the eyes, and he did something that left James breathless. He lowered his head in gratitude, a gesture of deep respect that wolves reserve only for their most revered leaders. Thor touched Snow's muzzle one last time, and Snow returned to his pack. James knelt beside Thor as they watched Snow disappear among the trees. He came to say goodbye for real, James whispered. He came to say thank you. Thor let out a low howl. It wasn't sadness, it was pride, because he had saved more than a life in that storm. He had saved an entire bloodline, and Snow now carried within him not only the blood of legendary wolves, but also the courage, the loyalty, and the unconditional love that a dark-coated German shepherd had taught him. Sometimes the best families are not the ones nature creates. They are the ones love chooses. And Thor's love saved far more than a freezing pup in the snow. It saved a species. It saved a legacy. It saved the proof that compassion has no limits. If this story touched you, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.